All right, well, we are going to go ahead and get started. I am recording this meeting for the purpose of being able to post it on the website tomorrow as well for those who could not attend, or if you want to go back and watch any of it. The document that I will share with you this evening also will be shared tomorrow in an email to the families, as well as put on the webpage for your reference. So I welcome you here this evening. I have about 97 participants, and I'm sure we'll have some on the live streaming side as well. I'm glad you could join us this evening and get a chance to talk a little bit about stage 4 and what that means for students, both virtual as well as those students who are coming in person. I'm Darah Bonham. I'm the principal at Albemarle High School. Joining me here today, we have Craig Smith, who is assistant principal, Dee Dee Jones, assistant principal, and Dr. Kate Howard, assistant principal. And again, we have an interpreter in Spanish, Ms. Duval, in the interpreter window as well, if you want to utilize that. So welcome. This is a chance for us to have some discussion about stage 4, what that means. I feel like that conversation has been going on for quite some time now. And finally, we get a chance to talk about in practice what that means. I will share with you a fairly lengthy document. The goal of tonight is to really get a chance to go through a lot of the protocols and what stage 4 means, the actual practice of running a school during this time period, and what it means for certainly for students, right, through their own personal lens, through instruction and other things that are just the day-to-day things about what it means to be back in school. I say that we've been planning stage 4 for a while, so because if you actually recall, way back before school even started, stage 4 was one of the options that was on the table for the school division to decide where to go. Obviously, we landed with stage 2 to begin with. So we actually have had students in the building since we started September 8th. That number has increased when we went to stage 3. And now as we get to stage 4, we have a chance certainly to have more students in the building. So the first thing that I would say before I start sharing the document is that we are in a situation where we are excited to have kids back in the building. Without a doubt, the notion of having students back in school and a chance to learn in an opportunity where they're in front of their teacher is a great opportunity for us in many ways. And it's not only from the instructional side, but also just for some of the routine and the social and the emotional and other pieces that come in just by being back in school. I will say with that we have to be very cautious in that approach, and we've been very thorough in our planning to ensure that when we provide this opportunity for students to come back in, we're doing it in a very safe manner, and we're doing it following the protocols that are necessary, many of them that are directed by the CDC and the health department, and certainly from guidance from our local agencies, including our school division. So this is a important opportunity for us to have students come back in, but we want to make sure we do it right. And doing it right means we do have to have some control over the process of what school looks like. And I think to my students out there who are coming back in, the piece that we're obviously super excited for is to get a chance to see you again. I think I've mentioned this to some faculty and others in the past. I've never been so excited as a principal to watch some students come back in and take their SOLs, just because I get a chance to see them for the first time in over a year. And some of our staff feel the same way. Now we get a chance to have more students come in. With that being said, school's going to look a little bit different because we have some of the restrictions that fall into place in regards to the protocol for all things we have to do based on the pandemic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you and get a chance to go through the protocol. Dr. Howard, do you see my screen? Thumbs up, excellent. So I will admit that I'm going to do something that we don't like to do in our classrooms very often, which I'm going to share a lot of information with you, and it's a one-way street right now. I'm just going to go through and plow through the document. And then what I want you to do is throughout the course of tonight's presentation, I want you to have an opportunity to ask questions. And how you'll do that is you can go through the chat feature, which you'll notice in the bottom of the screen. There you will see an opportunity. Kate Howard, Dr. Howard, who I alluded to a minute ago, she is the one who's going to be accepting all the questions this evening. What we will do is I will go through this part of the document, and then at the end, we'll get a chance to entertain the questions that you may have and open it up, obviously, to those who are in attendance to get clarity, to ask questions, and hopefully get as much information as you can from our meeting here this evening. So I will tell you that the document is fairly long in length. which just goes to the extent about how much effort we put into this. It's about 20 pages. Trust me, I'm not going to read every single line to you for 20 pages worth, but I do think it's important to highlight this to you, the key parts, as well as, again, sharing this with you, which I'll put out to the community tomorrow, along with the recorded video. The first thing on the document is literally just the communication for our counseling team and our admin team. I always want to remind our families of who to contact when they have concerns or issues. And that always goes the case, obviously, as we head into stage 4. If you have questions in relation to stage 4, same type of thing. You can email, you can certainly email myself, but you can email the counselor and the administrator who's responsible for that. So before we get into I call it an SOP, operating procedures for getting back to school for stage 4, I want to talk a little bit about the process so we all understand, how do we get to this point? As you recall, the school board decided way back before school started to go to stage 2 to begin. And then as we continue to move forward, it was looking as if obviously stage 3 was kicked in, and then the opportunity for stage 4 was presented before the school board. Right before winter break, we had the county sent out a choice for families to decide at that point whether they wanted to go to hybrid learning, which means that their students would come in up to 2 days a week, or whether they wanted to remain virtual. Those selections were made, and then we used that data to drive our process for determining where we moved forward. Now, at that point, stage 4 had not been decided, so we didn't know if and when it would be approved. The school board approved that on March 5th, for March 15th to kick off. So it's important to note that those decisions that families made on the hybrid and virtual are very important, because we had to make decisions in some cases starting a new term here with the spring, started in January, of what it looked like for student placements. And what I mean by that is we have some teachers who have, by virtue of some medical requests and other reasons, not coming in through stage 4. But obviously the majority of our teachers are. We wanted to make sure that if we had a chance to maybe shuffle some schedules by virtue of which teachers the students had, or periods and so forth, we did that to align to make that work. We wanted, one of the things that I said as a commitment as the principal is that if you have a student coming back in a hybrid instruction version, that you would be guaranteed 3 of the 4 teachers would be here and would be present. And as of the latest data, the majority of all the students coming back have mostly 4 out of 4. There's a few exceptions with 3 out of 4, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means if a teacher happens to not be here in person coming back. But we've stuck to that, and that data has helped us have that many our students being in those classes with teachers, which is the purpose of coming back for instruction to begin with. So the other things I'll just remind you, February 24th was the deadline for transportation requests. So one of the questions that will come up is, if I've made a choice and a decision, what do I do now if I want to change that? That is actually going to go through the counselor. If we end up, and I'll tell you how it works for if you are hybrid going to virtual, meaning that you've decided that you want to remain virtual, you email your counselor, we look at that, and it's a fairly easy switch because it just means you're going to stay at home. If you want to make a switch from virtual to hybrid, it's a little more complicated because we have to look at each class that every student is in to determine that we aren't over capacity for basis of how many students that we have that are coming in the building. And I'll explain a little bit about that process in a minute. But to go through the timeline of things, March 8th and 9th will be the 2 days that we'll have asynchronous instruction, which means that teachers are coming back in the building, they're getting everything set for the rooms, and the students will just have work they'll be doing independently. So there's no Zoom meetings or in-person days at all for those 2 days. On the March 10th and 11th, we're having our 9th graders who have not set foot in the building yet for the most part, never did an orientation last year, give them a chance to come in first. They will rotate through their classes, periods 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they'll get a chance to do some orientation exercises throughout the course of the day, which will be neat to just get them acclimated to Albemarle High School. And then March 15th, we will start with all students who were who selected in-person instruction to start coming in at those designated days. So what are the days that were set for students to come in? So A through K are students who are going to be on Monday and Wednesday, and then students, this is last name, L through Z will be coming on Tuesdays and Thursday. And again, that's very important because we can't have students come in any given day. We have to make sure that they come in the days that are allocated based on the ability to make sure our capacity of the classroom does not exceed what it can. And so if you look at the total number of students coming in, as of today, we have 880 students. We have about 1880 total for our entire school. So you look at it's a little bit less than 50% that are coming in for in-person, and you can see the breakdown. A lot of underclass coming in, a little bit less, fewer on the senior side, but you can see what it looks like as far as grade level. And the piece that I'll just explain to you, because I think this is trying to figure the logistics of it all. So if you just look at 880 and you divide it by the alphabet, that's roughly 440 one day and Monday and Wednesday, and 440 on the Tuesday and Thursday. And so what's important in knowing that is the county went through and looked at every single learning space that we had to determine what the max capacity was with the number of students based on the 6-foot distancing that were required. So a classroom that normally holds 24 students, as an example, may only be able to hold 10 to 12 because of social distancing. So when a student is scheduled to come in on an A day or a B day, at that point, we have to make sure that the capacity doesn't exceed the number of students that are allowed within the room. So we've been doing that throughout the course of this past month or so, and we've made it so that the alphabet falls to where kids will arrive. We have a few exceptions that we've made in certain circumstances because of the change of days, and we've had to switch a few students off of their alphabet day. But for the most part, I think we're set moving forward here starting in March. So let's talk a little bit about what does instruction look like in stage 4. So you know what it looks like in stage 3 for the most part. If your child is home doing virtual, they connect usually at the beginning of the class in the Zoom, and then they'll stay on board for about 45 minutes or so, and then they go to asynchronous mode where they then get a chance to do some work independently, or maybe stay on a Zoom to work with teachers. So when they come into school on stage 4, they're going to get a chance to obviously be in person. They're rotating from class to class, so they'll go to first period class and they'll get a chance to be in with the teacher. Because the teacher is also working with students virtually at home, they're going to be balancing that a little bit. They probably would still have their Zoom meetings up, and the students that are in person are able to see what's going on live, basically. And then when we get to asynchronous time, there will be ability to kind of shut down a little bit, maybe with the students that are home in virtual land, and then be able to work even a little bit more independently with the students that happen to be in person. So that's the bare bones of how it looks to begin with. It's an added value of certainly having kids in the classroom. And as time moves on, teachers will continue to work on ways in which it best suits the instructional needs of their particular classroom and their students moving forward. The topics that are coming forward range in a lot of different areas. Staff PPE, in terms of making sure all the staff have the supported wear and so forth in terms of protective equipment. The piece that is important for families to know is that we are asking, just as we've done since we started here in September, for families who have come in for any reason, that we are do the screening document, all right? And it's in English and Spanish here, but it's essentially asking to do a screening before you come in, making sure that students are symptom-free before they arrive to school. And we'll talk a little bit more about that down the road. And so that will be provided to parents, and making sure that the students feel like they're in a good spot before they come in. We do temperature checks. We've been doing them since September 8th when school started. When students come in, they have 3 major areas they come into: the main office, the bus lot, and the pod area. The pod area are the classrooms that are outside the athletic wing. It's a separate little unit that houses 8 classrooms that are for our English classes. So there'll be temperature checks set up there as well, of course, with adults monitoring that. We do have a few early bird classes that start early, and we'll work with those classes specifically about temperature checks coming in. I won't go through the temperature checks for staff, but they go through the same process and pre-screening as students do each and every day. So let's talk a little bit about the daily procedures of what it looks like. So if you have selected to come in for in-person instruction, you had the option of choosing transportation. Again, if you want to make a change to that, it's going to take a little bit of a delay now, because it's a pretty monumental task to make sure that we have our transportation fleet ready to pick up all students based on who's coming in. But that still can be changed. But if you want to know, as example, what bus is coming by and what time, here's directions here in terms of what that looks like. I'm not sure if this is totally live yet, but certainly before freshmen come on the 10th and 11th, this will be a way you can check to see which bus number, what time they're picking up in your neighborhood. There are transportation guidelines listed here as well. This is a pretty comprehensive document that talks about just the protocols for getting on a bus. Obviously, you must have a mask before you get on a bus. Transportation has extra masks for those who don't have them, but you seat one to a chair unless you're siblings, and so things are spaced out quite a bit moving forward once you get to school. So when you arrive here, those who do arrive by bus, they will arrive in the bus loop, which is behind near the athletic entrance, as they always have. And then instead of normally having just every bus come in and they just drop off as they arrive, we will put them in a queue. Each bus will drop off students individually. And then when they get dropped off, they will go and meet staff members who will conduct their temperature checks and then send them underneath a covered entryway and then send them on to their first class. And this is for any student, whether it's off the bus or coming in the main building, if they have a temperature above 100 degrees, then they are asked to go to a different location for a period of time. They're rechecked. If it turns out the fever continues to be greater than that, then they are escorted with the nurse to then talk to families and so forth to have them come picked up in case it gets to that point. Those who come off the bus and want breakfast, we have breakfast carts throughout the building where they'll be able to pick up that breakfast and head straight into their class period. Students are expected. This is another thing that's a little bit different. One of the beauties of Albemarle High School, and I know this as principal last year, is I could walk out into the breezeway on a beautiful day and students are everywhere and the band's playing sometimes and it's just a great festive atmosphere. Those are not going to be allowed at this point moving forward as we get into all the mitigation practices that are required. So when the buses will drop off right around 9:15. And at that point, then students are asked to go directly to class. And so we are going to ask them to refrain from hanging out in the breezeway and doing things that they normally have done, just because we have to manage the social distancing and the physical distancing that's required within all the protocols. So the students who walk or are dropped off or drive, they will enter through the main front entrance. The only difference from years past is the entrance that's further down, right outside the math and the Mesa wing. Typically that's open early in the morning. That will not be open. So all students who do not ride a bus will have to come through the front. The other thing that's a real critical change in this practice is the school will not open for students until 9:15. So obviously when they come off the bus, it's very easy to come in and get to your space. But when you have students who are walking or driving, we have to be very mindful of the fact that students who come in are going to have to be supervised, and they can't just be in areas where, again, they're just hanging out, talking to each other and not having a chance to, be in the classes, because we have to make sure that we're following all the protocol in regards to the physical distancing. So that's a big change that in every high school I've ever worked, I had students that come quite early sometimes to school. That is the part of when we arrive in the morning. That 9:15 is when they the doors will open for them to come in. We will have hallways that are indicated by directional arrows. I'll talk a little bit about that and what that transition looks like moving forward. Student drivers, unlike in past years, we had a pretty extensive process for students to come in and register the vehicle and pay for their vehicle as well in terms of the parking pass. That is not required this year. The good news is we have about almost 300 student parking spots out in the front. And if you take that by the number of even juniors and seniors that are coming in, we should be totally fine by the number of student drivers who decide they want to come in. And you do not have to get a parking pass. You can park in those areas. We do ask you park in the normal student spots and not in the faculty area. And then, of course, you would enter as you would through the main entrance as I described before. So I want to talk a little bit about classroom procedures. So I won't go into every detail about this, but one of the key things we have to do is make sure that we're doing sanitation and so forth in regards to what it looks like within the classroom. So we do ask that when students are entering the classroom, they sanitize their hands upon entering. We have ample supply of every classroom having wipes and hand sanitizer for students and staff to use. And then at the end of each class, we actually will give wipes to the students to be able to wipe down their area before they leave. In the evenings, we have a very thorough process for our building services to sanitize all classrooms. They actually have a spray and a mist device that actually helps to do that even better. And that will be done each and every evening. So when students come in, obviously some of our students eat breakfast, and whether that's by the purchase of them buying it or they happen to bring something with them. Again, we have different pickup spots for that. When the student comes into the classroom, say at by 9:30, the first 10 minutes of class will be allocated for students to be able to eat. And it's unique in the sense that our times where kids eat, whether it be breakfast or lunch, have to be dedicated, because obviously once you eat, you have to take your mask off in order to do that. So we have to make sure that we are being very purposeful in the time frame when students are doing that. We do, anytime a student is eating, we are asking them to remain at their desk and only remove their mask when they're eating or drinking as part of the mask policy, which I'll explain here as well. Physical distancing is also strictly enforced as well. Students are always encouraged to drink water. The water fountains are different now. We've actually got about 10 of the water bottle fillers installed at Albemarle High School, because we encourage families to bring, students to bring their own water bottles to school. We'll have some disposable ones for students who need them, but you can obviously drink water throughout the course of the day. You can fill them up in between classes, or if you happen to go to the restroom. Obviously, you know, it's expected that if you drink the water, you'll remove the mask, drink the water, and put the mask back up as part of the process. Our lunches, again, talking about what's different than what it looks like to be in school in comparison in the past. This is a very busy place with close to 1,900 students and over 2,000 when you think about adults, and kind of students coming and going a lot. As far as lunch is concerned, in a typical time period, it's going to be a lot different when we get to our stage 4, because lunches are all going to be served during second block. So they're all a part of the second period classroom. So what we do is we have a staggered starting point for when students will be able to start their lunch period. We're trying to still follow the schedule of where lunch is typically between 12:45 and 1:15. But we do understand that because we have the logistics of some students having to get their lunch because of the lunches that are made here at the school, we're having a process for how we're going to end up releasing students, and I'll explain that in a minute. We will have lunch carts set up around the building to facilitate the lunch distribution. Obviously, lunches at the school are not like they had before, where you have, you know, a menu, you know, of choices that you can make. There's a little bit less options, but there will be. I mean, they've been doing it since September, and they've been doing an amazing job through food services to provide some really great healthy meals for our kids. What's going to happen is we will get to a point where, and there's a schedule down here below, which I'll share with you, but and let me just jump down to that. So this is like a sample schedule. So we have 5 locations where our lunch carts are located, and then we have classrooms that are in the proximity of that. So we have staff members who will release the classes to go get their lunches. And what I've decided to do here as part of at Albemarle is, you know, students have been in their classrooms for 90 minutes. They went to another class for 90 minutes, and now they get a chance to eat. We don't want just to confine them into the classrooms the entire time. They need to get up, they need to stretch. So they're going to get an opportunity. Everybody will. If you have, as example, 8 to 10 students, let's say, that are in the classroom, when that time period comes for that class to go, they'll go to the cart. Those students who want to purchase their lunch or get their lunch will, but everybody will go. Everybody will get, even with the teacher, to stand up and just get a chance to stretch. They can walk around the building a little bit more if they want. At some point, we won't do this the first week or so, but when the weather starts getting nice, we are going to look at allocated areas outdoors where our students will be able to eat. But right now we are starting off to make sure we can have it all supported within the time frame that I scheduled here with the lunches being within the classroom. So we will look to that in the future. It's just important too that students, when we eat lunch, because that is the part where students obviously take their mask off, they will remain at their desk during their lunch. They'll maintain their physical distancing. You know, we want them at some point after lunch, right, to stand and stretch, as I mentioned before. But again, the mask to remove are for the purpose of when they're eating. It should be restored afterwards. The other part, which is, you know, I know for my seniors here, that's maybe one of the reasons why not as many are coming in, but you're not allowed to leave for lunch for campus. So it's a ball game in terms of what it used to be before. It's a 30-minute lunch. It's the same schedule we have now. We don't allow students to order food from exterior vendors. Food deliveries won't be accepted to the main office. So it's one of those ways in which we have to make sure we maintain the safety that's required in terms of having students in the building. So we will allow as well. I mean, I know this kind of sounds elementary, but it's important because students who've been at home for a long time, a year, have had a chance to probably have snacks and other things throughout the course of their time period. So we will open that up for the first 10 minutes as well. When we get the fourth block for students to bring a snack if they wanted and do follow the same procedures we had before. So what does it look like in terms of things that when students have to go use the restroom? So unlike in past years when students would have, number of minutes to go and use it in between classes, now because we have to monitor use of the restroom to have one student in at a time, then we end up having to put procedures in that will essentially ensure that. So restroom during transition times, they will not be open, but during the actual class period is when you would have a chance to ask the teacher to go to the restroom, and then you'll get a pass and you'll go to the restroom and so forth like you normally would. The other thing that's important is students need to see other teachers and staff members throughout the building sometimes. That could be anywhere between counselors they need to see, the school nurse, it could be our technology team, it could be administration, it could be all kinds of reasons. So what we are asking, instead of the typical way, which we would just write a pass for a student, have them go sit in counseling or sit in the admin office or sit in the tech center. Now we're asking that we'll communicate that need through the teacher, through the different parties, and then have counselors come down to the rooms, or the IT or administrator or whomever, to be able to meet with the students and work with them. So we ensure that we're following the practices that are necessary. Tech support, again, computers, and that link has been active since we started school in case we have issues. We still want to kind of continue and follow that. I won't read every line of this about the face coverings and the policy, but it does apply certainly to students. It applies to all adults. It applies to visitors coming in the building. It applies to when it's being worn. Obviously, even when you're waiting outside for the school building, the office building, or upon your arrival, you should be wearing the mask. And it is, again, required at all times, except for the times we talked about with eating and drinking and so forth. The face mask must also comply with the dress code policy as well. We also know that there are times when students may need a break, a mask break, and so we do have practice for that in terms of giving the kids a chance to get that designated space where they can take a quick mask break moving forward. Physical distancing, it's term social distancing. I think physical distancing is obviously another term because it's based on the 6 feet. So, part of what we have to try to adhere to is obviously that when students are in the building now and they're going to class and they're transitioning, is to try to still maintain a distance of 6 feet. Now, the one thing that we've done is we've looked at, again, limiting group size to make that happen. There will be no large, group meetings in pep rallies and all those kinds of things, obviously because of the size limitations. Our furnitures would be maybe limited a little bit in the classrooms, and we're working on that now. There are times, and this is important to note, we've been doing this since we started school here in September, is there are times when the interaction between an adult and a student, I know I've done this plenty of times since I've been in the building since September 8th, is to go up to a student, maybe help them on their computer, get a chance to get them logged in. So there are times that are deemed to be appropriate where staff can, who are masked as well as the student, be able to have brief and not prolonged conversations with the students. And we've been doing that, like I said, since we started, and that's advised by CDC and the health department. Now we know that close contact means when you actually have a prolonged interaction less than 6 feet, more than 15 minutes cumulative. So we're mindful of that within our staff and our practices as we work with kids. The questions come up about, well, what happens if students don't adhere to the practice and the policy? So, everything we do in terms of correcting behavior in a school should be based on understanding that behavior and why it's, in this case, potentially unsafe, and what should be the right thing to do to move forward. So we know a student inadvertently is going to have a situation where maybe the mask isn't worn properly, or they've gotten too close to a friend or what have you, and we'll do like we always do and talk about making sure they're mindful of that to correct the behavior. That's the goal, is to correct behavior and move forward. If it does get to a point where potentially a student has violated and it feels to be, purposeful or defiant, then teachers intervene on the first one, and they talk to family members about that. If it continues, then that gets up to the level of the administration team, who will follow up with the families as well and make sure that students understand the need for safety within our school. And then it could get to a point, if it continued, where students would be asked to return to virtual learning for a set period of time until we made sure that they could understand the guidelines and be able to adhere to them moving forward. So a lot of what's next is just some of the practices and protocols about managing student health. And I highlight some of these because I think it's just important for us to be partners in this process, because we have to, as a school community. The name mentioned there, Carol Janssens, is a critical part of our team. She's our school nurse. She's an amazing woman who does great work for us, and really is at the center of a lot of the health decisions and so forth that are made individually with students and even beyond. So that's a name. This document, again, will be provided to you and person you would reach out to with any concerns. But if we do get to a point where in class, if a student's not feeling well, we'll call the nurse. If we have symptoms that seem to be COVID related, obviously we're going to call home. We're going to ask that family members pick up the students within 30 minutes if possible. If not, we have some isolation areas where they can wait. And then we kind of continue from there. If we have a situation where we're responding to a suspected or confirmed case, we also have a protocol in regards to that. Again, some of this talks about just some of the procedures about the isolation room and things of that nature. But we are making sure that we are referring people to healthcare providers to make sure that they are getting checked and getting screened to ensure that we know that they're well before they have a chance to come back. Again, nurse will notify parents in the situation where they feel somebody may be symptomatic in relation to COVID. We'll follow if we get to a point where we're suspecting perhaps a student or a staff member was in the building. There are protocols we follow in regards to disinfection of that space as well as ventilation. And then we do everything in partnership with the health department. So if we get to a point where, and I'll share in a minute, have a confirmed case, there is a protocol for what we do to have to follow up. But, in this case, we work with the health department. We look at close contacts of symptomatic individuals. And so if we have people that fall into that category, they are notified by the school in regards to the potential of being in contact with someone who has the symptoms. And then, we'll kind of continue that kind of return to work flow chart that talks about when a student should return, and that kind of follows through with the rest of these steps that are here. So when we have a situation, we do have a confirmed case within the building. Our employees have a process where they report to their supervisors, and obviously parents and caregivers of students should report that to the school nurse as soon as possible. That has been identified. That information does remain confidential, although we do have to do some investigation, because we then do work with our local officers at the health department to determine the process for what needs to happen next. And a lot of that is working with the contact tracers to make sure we know where that student or where that adult was and where we go from there. So if a close contact comes from a school setting, then the health department investigative team will work with the school. We'll get names of students and guardians and so forth to see who possibly has been exposed, so we can communicate that to them. Individual who was tested positive is excluded from school until the return to school criterion below has been met. And then again, we do some interior things if we know that there's an identified person that works with the disinfection and ventilation within the building. The decision to close a building, right, is independent of the superintendent's decision based on if it happened to be more widespread, perhaps, and that's on a school-by-school basis if it ever got to that point. Exclusion or quarantine of close contacts. So the health department will investigate activities of the person who did test positive, determine who perhaps was individuals that were maybe at risk during that time period. So the health department's been obviously doing this for a year. We've had some examples where that's happened here at Albemarle as well. A close contact, an individual, I explained this before, within 6 feet of an infected person for at least 15 minutes, starting from 2 days before the first person became sick. So all that becomes pretty much into the weeds of things, but what will happen is, again, once we understand when a student or an adult became sick, we go back and look and to see who they were in contact with through the course of that time period. We will ask close contacts to stay home. Again, people will be communicated. You've already seen as principal, I've sent out messages that are somewhat generic saying that we've had potentially someone confirmed, or we have people that are being quarantined. Those communications will still continue. Obviously, they may be a little bit more specific if it happens to relate to you or your child within the building. So again, I won't read all of this. The protocol is there. Again, it's been in place for a while. It's just now that we have more students in the building, it's important to share. And again, we will keep work. We work with the nurse. We work with the health department. We just don't make, just a decision because we think it's the right thing to do. We do it in partnership with all our partners within the community. The return to school work criteria, if an individual has symptoms, they stay at home until at least 10 days have passed from the onset of symptoms. The individual has fever free for 24 continuous hours without the use of fever reducing meds, and then respiratory symptoms have improved. So that's a lot of the protocol in case we get to that point of having to notify students or families in terms of what's going on, but I encourage you to go back once I share the document to read that. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and just talk about bell schedules and transitions and some of the practical sides of, getting from class to class and so forth. So this bell schedule is what we've been going by since we started from the beginning of the school year. You obviously know we have the 4 classes and so forth, with the lunch in the middle. The only difference is that the students that are in person, they're going to remain in their classes for an extra 10 minutes during that time period, because the transition time from class 1 to class 2 is 5 minutes, and the same way it goes from 2 to 3 and 3 to 4 in between. The reason for that is because we have to ensure students are going from point A to point B really without a chance to, what would normally be, hanging out in the breezeway or doing other things. We have to get them from location to location based on the social distancing and physical distancing requirements. So one of the things I never thought I would be saying I'm doing as a high school principal is that we had to create one-way hallways and stairwells for classroom transition. So what that means is, and this is only between first and second and third and fourth. So when you come in the morning, either by bus or by car or however, you can walk down any hallway you want, and that's not an issue in the stairwells. But when we do transitions, because we are having students out in the hallway at the same time, we are doing one-way flows, and it is counterclockwise what it looks like at Albemarle. Albemarle is not a simple school like Monticello, what really is kind of easy and flow. We've had a lot of additions and so forth that make some areas not flow as much in a circle. So there's some unique ways in which our traffic will flow. But when we do dismiss between first, second, third, and fourth, we will have students follow that direction. And it's going to be ample time. And so there's no need about worrying about being tardy to class and things of that nature. We're going to make sure everyone gets to class on time. But we have some, I won't go into the uniqueness of how the flow works. We're going to have ample arrows throughout the hallways, making sure we know where people flow. It also includes how do you get to the pods and how do you leave from the pods to come back into the building. Our art classrooms and band classrooms obviously have a unique setup in terms of how you get to those. All those will be established, and you'll clearly see from identification. And we'll have adults out in the hallways at all times during transitions. That's a part of what our teachers will be doing and our staff to make sure students know where to go. So freshmen usually get lost at Albemarle from the start. Everyone's going to be confused a little bit to this because of the practice, but eventually we'll get to that point. The breezeway is actually the only area that's not a one-way pattern at any point in time. And the reason is because it's this huge open air opportunity to cut from one part of the building to the next. So it's only becomes one way once you get a chance to enter the building from the breezeway. This is a diagram that just shows you a little bit about the flow, again, of what it looks like to go from, transition time from one part of the building to the next, both on a downstairs and upstairs as well. So, and again, this will all be clearly labeled. And it'll take a while, but it won't be long before students understand what that looks like in terms of the rotation. So I want to explain a little bit about the virtual pods that we have. And I referred to the very beginning of this meeting that we have some teachers, it's a few, but there are some that aren't here in person for different accommodation reasons. And so when a student who's in person comes in, and let's say they go to first period and their teacher's there, and they go to second block, and that teacher is a virtual teacher, what they will do is they will go to one of 3 pods that we will have, just like we've set up now with our learning coaches. And they go to those spaces. They will be identified on their schedule prior to the start of school, and they will simply go into the classroom where that teacher is actually teaching virtually from home or wherever, and then they're just going to tune in like they would if they were actually at home doing the virtual learning. Again, we've really minimized the impact of that for our students. No student should have more than one potential virtual teacher. And I would say of the 880 that are coming in, I think there's like 600 plus that have every 4 of their teachers that are here. So it's a few numbers that are there because of the scheduling, but for those who do not have a teacher in that particular block, then you will get a chance to go to these spaces each and every day. We do have the auditorium, which is going to be used for some of the classrooms. So let's just say one of our teachers happens to be out and has in-person students coming in during the period. Instead of having a sub come into every classroom at Albemarle High School, it's the largest school in the division. I've got over 200 staff members here, and on any given day with teachers, I could have 5 to 10 teachers that are out. Obviously, we have to be able to man that with substitutes typically, but now what we're able to do is once we identify teachers aren't going to be present, we'll bring the students down to the auditorium. We have a limit in terms of the number we can have in there, but we'll socially distance them. And then we'll have a learning coach in there where they can get tuned into their classwork and just continue. So on the occasion where a teacher doesn't come in because of an illness or what have you, then that's where our students will go, and we'll be monitoring that through the process. So talk a little bit about student dismissal. Buses will go around a little bit after 4 o'clock, at least for the first couple of weeks, and we'll dismiss by hallway, which is why we don't have to worry about the one-way pattern as much, because we'll release them kind of slowly throughout the course of the evening. Students who are leaving by virtue of car, by pickup, would be the same way we've always done. They can just exit the different parts of the building to be able to go to their location. We are asking as most as we possibly can for parents to try to pick their students up at the conclusion of the day. We will have some seats out front. Obviously, they can stand out in front of the building. If inclement weather persists, we will have some seats out in the front lobby, social distance, where they can sit until their ride comes. But we obviously know that students need to be picked up. If they're participating in sports or extracurricular activities, then they'll report right to their designated spot right after dismissal happens to exist or occur. I won't go through a whole lot of attendance. I think you know what that looks like by virtue of the communications I've given out about how we mark present virtual synchronous and present virtual asynchronous and things of that nature. But this just gives some guidelines to that. For the first time, you will start to see on your child's Power School or parent portal, you'll see present now marked. We haven't marked that since day one because students have never really been present in person except for a handful, but now that when they go to class, that's how they'll be listed moving forward. So when you start looking at attendance coding, you'll know a little bit what that looks like. Anybody who arrives late, we do ask that students, again, will come into the main office. They'll have their temperature checked. They will go to the attendance office till they receive a slip and be able to then go to class. We know that students have early dismissals. Again, a change in practice. We do want to make sure that if your son or daughter is going to be dismissed because they have a dentist appointment or what have you, please have them bring a note in. When they come in the morning, they'll go straight to the attendance office. We'll code that, and then they'll have a note to be able to leave their classroom at their dismissal time. If for some reason you have to call in to have your child dismissed, again, call the attendance office and they can follow that process. When you do a pickup as a parent, again, a lot of times you would just come in, sign in, go to attendance, say, I need to check out my child. We're discouraging that for obviously the number of visitors within the building. We have increased the number of visitor spots out front. I think we have up to 8 to 10 that are very purposeful for parents to park, briefly to come and get their child. But what we're asking is the number that's here, it's listed as what you call to then have your child depart from the school. So if it's a planned one, then students should be coming out anyway. But if you have to call for some reason, we just ask you to park in the visitor spots, call the attendance office, and then from there, you'll get a chance to have them released from their classes. A few other things that are just, I promise you, I'm going to stop talking in a minute and get a chance to have you ask some questions. But we go through some of the same protocols with our fire drills, our lockdown drills, our tornado drills. Those will all be part of the process we will do when we get back. I will say this: if your son or daughter, or if you're a student here on with us this evening, and you have a study hall, we are obviously, if you have a first or fourth period study hall and you have the means for transportation, and that's an opportunity for you to still remain home because the study halls, while they'll still be running like they normally would, obviously if you have a release or so forth, you don't have to come in. If you are in person, then you are required obviously to go to the study hall in those designated areas that we have. PE classes, we are recommending the PE teachers are that when you're coming in, while some of the activities, as well as you can imagine, are limited just based on the protocols that we have to follow, they are going to be active and they may be walking around the track or doing stuff in the gym. We are asking that you bring an extra mask each day just in case, I don't know, perhaps you're outside one day, it's kind of hot and it gets kind of sweaty, just to have something to change. Never thought we'd talk about changing masks, but that's something that wouldn't be a bad idea if you're in a PE class coming back in for stage 4. The last couple of things, after school activities. So what does it mean to be able to stay after school? So as you probably know, we have athletics that have been running for several months now. We also have opened up, our marching band is going. I know that Jennifer Morris with choir, Andrew LaPratt with band, they've all done some unique opportunities or had provided some unique opportunities for students to stay after. So what happens is if our staff wants to work with students in a supervised manner, and it could be a club, it could be, you know, anything that maybe looks like normal school, instead of just doing it and just saying, hey, you know, Thursday after school, we're going to meet in room B12. We have to make sure that we know from an administrative perspective of these events and approve them and make sure, again, we're following practices and so forth. So staff will actually submit an application to say that we're having students for a club and they're going to start meeting in a couple of weeks. And then, you know, we go through make sure that all the practices and the protocols followed, and then we approve it. And then that way we get a chance to do our students to do some of the things that are obviously a little bit, you know, above and beyond. And what they really appreciate a lot of time is about being a part of the school. And then substitutes, I mentioned it a little bit before about how our substitute in our classes will be, many of them will be in the auditorium for students to be supported rather than just having a small number of students with a person, you know, coming in that's not necessarily one of our employees as part of our teaching staff. So I am going to stop talking. I appreciate all of you, all 115 of you who have paired with me, whoever's watching the live stream, for me to get a chance to go through this. I know it's comprehensive. I know that if you are a student, you listen to this, you say, oh my gosh, like that just seems so restrictive and so controlled. And the reality is there is a part of that is the case, because that's how we have to safely operate school. I think we're all hopeful that things continue to get better and restrictions continue to get lifted and we have more opportunities that look more like school. But this is obviously where we start. You know, the other part that I would say, because people have asked the question, well, you know, Principal Bonham, what's the value of my child coming into school? And my response to them is, I know where we've been and I know where you've been, and all of us have over the last year. And I know one of the things that, you know, I think about my seniors who have missed out on all the opportunities of what it's like to be a senior in high school and all the things they look forward to. And I just think about everybody, even the freshmen who have never had a chance to walk foot in the hallways here at Albemarle, to think about how do we get to the point of trying to get some normalcy back to our lives when we know we can't totally get to that point yet. But it's important for us to realize that, you know, our students need a lot of them, right? Some of them are thriving in the virtual world, but many of them need that socialization, even though it may look different with masks on and the social distancing that occurs. Having a chance, like I said before, of me and other adults in the last month or so seeing students come in just to take an SOL test, which I probably never would have celebrated in the past, has really given hope. And the fact of just seeing students that you haven't seen in a while, having them back in the building, you know our staff well enough, hopefully, that they are very caring, nurturing. I mean, they love kids. That's why they do the job. And it's been very hard to do this in the black boxes that we're even doing tonight. So any chance we get to elevate that a little bit, certainly on the instructional side, it can be an advantage, but also from the standpoint of just making contact with students again, seeing faces, even though they're masked, and getting a chance for students to see each other a little bit. And also understanding that those who don't come in to still get the experience that they've been getting at home in the virtual world, because it's not a bad thing that you're staying home. That's a choice that you have made, or others have decided to do that. And also knowing that our teachers, in August, they weren't experts at Schoology or Zoom. And now they've become that way because they've had to, and they've adapted, and I know they continue to get better. And I just applaud them. And I know we've given, I appreciate the grace we've given everybody to understand what it's like to move forward in this, again, unprecedented times that we happen to have. So I think there's a lot of excitement to coming back. I realize for students who have lived Albemarle in the past, it doesn't feel the same. And I realize some people may come in and decide that that's not going to be for them, but I also know that it will add some value, I believe, to the experiences of our kids being here. So I will stop talking now. I've asked if you would to put any questions that you may have into the chat. Dr. Kate Howard is the name you'll see. She's fielding all the questions. And then what I'm going to do is just give her a second to look at some of those, ask them out loud, and then either myself or someone else, a part of the team, will do the best we can to try to answer your questions for this evening.
Okay, so right off the bat,